Here we go, Understanding America, episode 2. So, in the previous episode, we discussed part 1 of this book, and this book is A Voyage Long and Strange by Tony Horwitz. Now, this book is divided into 3 sections. The sections are discovery, conquest, and settlement. So, we covered discovery in the last episode. It was all about the Vikings and Columbus, Amerigo Vespucci. Columbus, the guy who was perpetually lost. He was looking for India, and he stumbled into the Americas, but he never set foot on U.S. soil. So that was all about the first portion of this book. Now today we're going to talk about conquest, the second part of the book, the second section of this book, in which you actually have European explorers for the first time setting foot in the present-day United States. And we're going to talk about 3 expeditions, or 3.5 expeditions. The Panfilo de Narváez expedition, which involves... Sorry?
What is that?
Yeah, we'll go into that, which involves a guy called Alvar Núñez, Cabeza de Vaca. Very interesting guy and very interesting story. That's the first expedition. Then there is the Coronado expedition. And then there is the De Soto expedition. And there's half an expedition in between as well. So we're going to cover these expeditions. And that's when European explorers first set foot in the actual United States and the long-term consequences of what happened. So that's what we're talking about today. Now, we have to understand, dialing back a little bit to 1492, when Columbus first discovered the Americas, 1492. This year, 1492, also coincides with the completion of the Spanish Reconquista. Reconquista is the reconquest of Spain by the native Spaniards from the Arabs and the Moors.
Okay.
So Spain had been conquered from northern Africa by Arabs and what the Europeans and the Spaniards called the Moors, who are North African peoples. They were Muslims. And they had conquered Spain beginning in the 700s, 800s AD. And until 1492, the Spaniards were fighting to reconquer Spain from these outsiders. And 1492 marks the year when the Reconquista was complete. So Spain was full of this unbridled confidence. The people of Spain were full of confidence. They felt they could take on the whole world. They had ousted these foreigners from their lands after centuries, after 7 centuries or so. And now we can take on the whole world. So, and they were full of this Christian zeal, this crusading zeal, and so on. Now, here's the deal. The Spanish crown, the Spanish royal family, was not involved in the conquest that eventually happened in the Americas. They were not involved directly in the conquest. Conquest was a private enterprise. So what happened is that the Spanish crown, granted licenses to explore and exploit new lands in the Americas. And what they did was they would not bankroll or finance these expeditions, and they did not send Spanish soldiers. These explorers, the so-called conquistadors or conquerors, were essentially armed entrepreneurs who assembled their own force and assumed the full risk. And if they did make any profit, the Spanish crown would take 20% or 1/5 of the profit. That was the deal. So it was completely risk-free for the Spanish crown. And these armed entrepreneurs, they would take up all the risk. And the payoff, if it worked fine, was great fortune, great riches, and great fame, and great glory. So that was the deal. Now, these people were called conquistadors. And in Spain, you had a very hierarchical kind of society. So you had the royalty on the top, then you had the aristocracy and nobility, and then you had people employed by them, and at the very bottom, which is about 95% of the population, you had the peasants who essentially were landless, and they would work for whoever the masters were. Now, if you wanted to change your fortune in Spain, you had very little avenue for that. And one of the avenues you got was to go to a new planet, essentially. So going to the Americas was like today going to Mars. It was like that. So one of the ways to make your fortune in life was to go to this new land and take the biggest risk that you can imagine. And if it pays off, then you could come back to Spain with a great amount of glory, with a great amount of fortune, riches, and then your entire position in society would be changed, because money, after all, in a settled society is what decides where your position is in society. If you have money, you can buy titles, you can marry into a rich family, and so on. So what happened is that there were two classes of individuals who would go to the Americas. One was called the Hidalgos. A Hidalgo is the lowest rank of the nobility. No, Hidalgo means son of somebody, but nobody of any note. So Hidalgo means son of someone, sons of someone. And then there were the caballeros. In French, we call them the chevalier. In Spanish, it's caballeros. Caballeros means knights, essentially. So these are like a higher rank of nobility, people with a little more standing in society, more money, more funds, and more resources. So there were the knights, there were the higher nobility, and then you have the hidalgos, who were the bottom rank of the nobility. These are the people who would go and make their fortunes, and try to make their fortunes, typically, in the New World. So now this guy, Tony Horwitz, in this book does not mention it, but I have to mention this. A lot of this, see, essentially, when you understand that the Spanish crown did not want to take any risk, but they wanted 20% of the fortune or the profit, it means that it was just a quest for gold and slaves. Okay, slaves have monetary value. Territories have monetary value. And the resources that come out of these territories also have monetary value. And gold, obviously, is the thing that everybody is after. So that is the bottom line. At the end of the day, that's what Spain was after. It was not some great civilizing mission to civilize the natives and bring the light of Christianity to them. That wasn't the cause. The purpose was simply to enrich Spain. Okay? Now, so it was all about conquest and plunder and enslavement of people. But even in the 16th century, you needed some kind of moral ground for this. Okay? You needed some kind of moral justification for the horrors that you're going to unleash on this entire new continent.
Right.
So that's where the Christian church comes in. That's where the Catholic Church comes in. And the popes of the Catholic Church, they would issue decrees called papal bulls. Now, this guy, Tony Horwitz, in this book doesn't mention it at all, but it is very important that I mention it over here right now. So a papal bull is a decree which is an official order that has the force of law. And the most powerful geopolitical entity in Europe, in the entire Christian world, for the longest time, was the Catholic Church. It was based out of the Vatican, right, in Rome. So the popes would issue papal bulls. One of these was the Dum Diversas papal bull, 1452. And here's what it says. It authorized Portugal, okay? Portugal was involved in this. So the Dum Diversas papal bull of 1452 authorized Portugal to fight, subjugate, and conquer those rising against the Catholic faith and struggling to extinguish Christian religion. And this document consigned warring enemies who lost to perpetual servitude or slavery. So that's one notable papal bull, 1452, Dum Diversas. Then there is 1455, a bull called Romanus Pontifex. Okay? This instructed Portugal to capture and subdue all non-Christians, to reduce their persons to perpetual slavery. This is an official decree by the Pope. It instructs Portugal to capture and subdue all non-Christians, to reduce them to perpetual slavery. And church leaders, they argued that slavery served as a natural deterrent and Christianizing influence to barbarous behavior among pagans. So 1452, 1455, it all is about Portugal, because Spain hasn't yet become a great colonizing power, right? Now this 1455 bull, the Romanus Pontifex bull, is prominently displayed in various Portuguese-built churches in India, in Goa and Kerala and Cochin and other parts of India, as a justification for building these Christian churches on top of destroyed Hindu temples and all that. So that's the legacy that these bulls had in India. Now, 1481, Aeterni Regis papal bull. It granted to Portugal all territorial acquisitions made by Christian powers in Africa and eastwards to the Indies. India, Indonesia, all of that, including China and whatever, okay? But then 1492 happens. Yeah. And Columbus discovers this entire new world. And he thinks it's India, but very quickly people realize it's not India. So 1494, the Spanish crown and the Portuguese, they agreed upon a treaty called the Treaty de Tordesillas. Treaty of Tordesillas.
What does it mean?
So this was a treaty between Portugal and Spain. They decided that there is a meridian. A meridian is a line from pole to pole, North Pole to South Pole, South Pole to North Pole. Okay. So there's a meridian 370 miles west of the Cape Verde Islands off the western coast of Africa. They decided that this is the dividing line. The lands to the east of this meridian would all belong to Portugal. And the lands to the west of this will all belong to Castile or the Spanish crown.
Wow.
So they divided the world into half. Half for Portugal, half for Spain.
So no kind of agreement from other kingdoms.
Others don't matter.
Okay.
Others don't matter. See, the other kingdoms like England and whatever else,
England were not very powerful.
They were geopolitically insignificant, and the non-Christians did not matter. They were not humans, right? That sort of thing. So they divided the world neatly into two spheres.
So this was 1494.
1494, 2 years after Columbus discovers America. The Treaty of Tordesillas.
Okay.
And I'm sure there are more papal bulls and other treaties, but I think this sets the context. Okay. This is part of history. This is part of the historical record. This guy doesn't mention it, Tony Horwitz, but it's a great book. And so I thought that I should mention this because
definitely
this is
very important. Yeah.
Right? Right. So 1452, we know that Columbus stumbles upon the Americas. And then he spends a few years there. And he sets up a couple of cities. One is Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic on the island of Hispaniola. He also discovers Cuba. And so he also stumbled upon Venezuela by mistake during one of his later voyages and so on. So until 1508, Spain is content with ruling over Hispaniola and having a little bit of presence in Cuba and so on. Okay, until 1508. Then from 1508 onwards, Spain starts exploring Puerto Rico, which is nearby, also Jamaica, and also having a much stronger presence in Cuba. 1508. In 1513, Spain and its exploration suddenly explodes beyond the Caribbean. Okay? And by 1542, so by 1513, they finally start exploring beyond the Caribbean, of a huge wave of exploration beyond the Caribbean region, the West Indies region, 1513. By 1542, Spain has conquered a greater empire, an empire greater than Rome at its peak. Enormous empire they conquered in just after 1513 until 1542. 1542 is the 50th year of the discovery of the Americas by Columbus. Okay? So all of a sudden it just explodes, and that's where the conquistadors come in. So what happened is that Vasco Núñez de Balboa, he's a Spanish explorer. He crossed the Pacific Ocean. Ferdinand Magellan crossed. Vasco Núñez de Balboa, he reached the Pacific Ocean, and Ferdinand Magellan crossed the Pacific Ocean. And then you have two big conquests by the Spaniards in which they found a lot of gold. After all, it's all about gold. First, it was Hernán Cortés, a conquistador, who destroyed the Aztec Empire of Mexico, present-day Mexico.
Oh, okay.
And the capital city of Mexico was Tenochtitlan. It's today called Mexico City. Okay? So he destroyed the Aztec Empire, and he got hold of a tremendous amount of gold and all kinds of wealth and riches. That is Hernán Cortés. Another conquistador, Francisco Pizarro, he destroyed the Inca Empire in Peru, which is in South America. And he also, as a consequence of this, he was able to find a lot of gold. Okay, and all of this gold, 20% plus, went to the Spanish crown. So it was great. So that's what happened. So in 1518, Hernán Cortés, he reached Mexico with 400 men. 400 men, okay? And the capital of the Aztec Empire of Mexico Tenochtitlan, which is now Mexico City, it had a population of greater than 100,000 people.
Okay.
This guy comes with 400 men. The capital city alone has more than 100,000 people. And it's a warrior nation. Okay. The leader, the ruler of the Aztec people was Moctezuma. And Moctezuma, so what happens, the story that's told is that Hernan Cortes, with 400 men, conquered an empire of millions.
Okay.
Okay,
So
that's the story.
10 times, yeah.
Not 10 times, God knows what
Yeah.
times. Okay, I'm not doing the math here. Okay?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, so that's the story that we are told. What they don't tell you is that when he attacked the capital city, Tenochtitlan, he had tens of thousands of warriors on his side who were from rival tribes. Good old divide and conquer that the British later tried in other parts of the world. So, see, there's always geopolitical conflict and various political issues happening in any part of the world. So you have a dominant power, which is an empire, which is an imperial power. Moctezuma, the Aztec Empire, has subdued many other smaller tribal confederations and tribal groups to create this big empire. And at any given point in time, you will have disaffected people. So the Spaniards took advantage of this, and they brought many of these tribes on their side, and they marched upon Tenochtitlan with 400 Spaniards, but more than 10,000 other tribes people. And then they attack Tenochtitlan. The Aztec emperor Moctezuma actually came with gold and offered them gold and gifts and all that, but that wasn't enough for the Spaniards. They wanted everything. So they capture him and they attack the city. And when they are attacking the city, they have 400 Spaniards and more than 10,000 other Indians, so-called Indians of other tribes. And at the same time, what historians try to downplay is that there was a smallpox epidemic that was ravaging Tenochtitlan at the time. The Spaniards brought diseases from the old world. So this smallpox epidemic was ravaging Tenochtitlan at the time, and it killed more natives than the Spaniards and the invading force did. And that's why Hernan Cortes was able to defeat the Aztec Empire and plunder all of its wealth and do whatever he did. So that's 1518. Hernan Cortes and his conquest of the Aztec Empire in present-day Mexico. Then there's another individual who was of note. His name is Juan Ponce de León. So in 1513, he sets out to discover what's east of Hispaniola and Cuba. West of Hispaniola and Cuba. If you look at the map today, the West Indies, if you go west from it, you reach Mexico and Florida. So Juan Ponce de León. And I think Juan Ponce de León is kind of referenced in the Pirates of the Caribbean, one of the movies. I remember I'd seen one of those movies long ago, like 15, 20 years ago, whenever they came out. And this guy, Juan Ponce de León, is referenced in one of these movies. I don't remember which one, but yeah, interesting cultural reference. So 1513, Juan Ponce de León sets out westwards from the Caribbean to discover what lies to the west. And he sails from Puerto Rico, present-day Puerto Rico. And he reaches the coast, very large coast, around the time of Easter over there. And what he finds is that the coast is is extremely forested. Thick forests and very nice smell comes from the forest. And it's a very nice, pleasant land, but it's thickly forested. And it's Easter time. And in Spain, you have something called the Feast of Flowers around Easter time. So Juan Ponce de León is able to land there, and because it's the Feast of Flowers season or whatever it's called, and in Spanish, the way you say flower is flor. The word for flower is flor. So because of this coincidence, it is Easter time, it's the Feast of Flowers, and it's a very pretty land. He called the place Florida, La Florida.
Oh, okay.
The flowered land or whatever, La Florida.
La Florida.
So Juan Ponce de León landing in present-day Florida is the first recorded landing of a European on present-day US territory.
Oh.
Okay? So that's Juan Ponce de León. And later you have...
So it was 1518?
1513.
1513,
Yeah.
okay.
1518 was Hernan Cortes destroying Mexico, the Aztec Empire. 1513, 5 years before.
It's so quick, the step that they are going ahead. So
Yeah, very quick.
So after that, this 1494, that agreement between Spain and Portugal.
It's implemented very rapidly.
I mean, I'm just trying to understand in the eastern part where the Portuguese arrive here in 1498, correct?
You mean India?
Yeah, in India.
Yeah, Vasco da Gama.
Yeah, Vasco da Gama. So the first European church was built in Cochin. That was 1503. Then it was completed in, within few years' time. That was St. Francis Church.
Okay.
In India, in Cochin.
Okay.
So I'm just trying to understand.
I'm sure if you go there, they will mention that 1455 bull, Romanus Pontifex.
Yeah, it'll be very nice to see. These are very important points that the gentleman should have mentioned in this book,
He is writing about the Americas. I'm adding additional context.
Correct.
Okay.
But this is a very important thing. That's how these two kingdoms, how they agreed upon and divided the whole world.
So it would have been good if he had mentioned these papal bulls and the Treaty of Tordesillas and all that, but it's okay. He has written this book from a certain perspective, from his own perspective of discovery and retracing the routes of these conquistadors and
So
all that.
1513 in Florida, and here in India was from 1510. The east coast, the western coast, starting from Kerala to up north, came under Portuguese.
Yeah.
Then even Goa and all that. So it was so interesting that how in the the western coast, like say Mumbai and all the way to Diu, how the Sultan of Gujarat, they had this fight and got defeated by the Portuguese in 1534. How the pacing of decades time, they were really, really confident about this.
So they were very proactive. The moment this treaty is signed, they both go out, set out to conquer the half of the world each
Correct.
side.
Yeah.
And it's very clear that the Portuguese also did not come to India to do any with a civilizing mission or anything. They were just after plunder and slavery and all that. And the same applies to the Spanish.
Correct.
So this was happening in parallel. On the one hand, the Portuguese trying to colonize the west coast of India and hopefully the whole of India from their perspective, and building churches on top of destroyed temples and all that. And on the other hand, you have the conquest of the Americas that's going on at the same time. And it's being done by the Spanish. Very interesting parallels. But
Yeah.
Historians and most people, they usually see this as completely separate events, and then they don't correlate the two. But it's happening at the same time.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. So we have Juan Ponce de León, who discovers Florida, 1513. And later, I'm sure he does multiple trips, at least one more trip, and he is killed, he is shot by an arrow, because nobody likes the Spaniards, right? None of the natives, none of the so-called Indians likes the Spaniards. And Juan Ponce de León is shot with an arrow, and he dies. And for some reason, this myth springs up that Juan Ponce de León was looking for the fountain of youth, and it is supposed to be somewhere in Florida. Okay?
What is a youth?
Fountain of youth means if you drink the water from this fountain, you will never grow old.
Oh my God, okay.
Okay? So he was looking for the fountain of youth, and that's why he was repeatedly trying to, make forays into this territory.
They're all good salesmen, actually, right?
I think this was not a story that Juan Ponce de León started. I think somebody else afterwards came up with this myth.
Okay.
And this myth has endured until today.
All right.
That somewhere in Florida, there is the fountain of youth. There are other myths as well. So, yeah. So Juan Ponce de León, he died at the age of, 42, so in his 40s, I think, or late 30s or early 40s. And 1513, his was the first recorded landing of a European on present-day U.S. territory, U.S. soil. So that's 1513. 1518, Mexico, Hernán Cortés, okay? Now, that's an interesting expedition that we're going to discuss. It's called the Narváez expedition. It lasts from 1528 until 1536. It was never supposed to last this long, but it's an interesting story. So there is this Spanish explorer. His name is Alvar. His name is Panfilo de Narváez, and he comes to the New World. He comes to the Americas on an expedition. He knows that this place called La Florida exists west of the Caribbean. And looks like a very beautiful land with a lot of promise. Maybe there's a lot of gold there. So let's go and explore. So Panfilo de Narváez comes with 5 ships. He has 300 men and he has 42 horses. Okay? He is the commander of this expedition. I'm sure that he financed it as well. He must have taken debt or whatever. So Panfilo de Narváez comes here, comes to Florida, He lands in 1528. One of the men on his mission, on his expedition, is a guy called Alvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca. And at the end of the day, it turns out to be this guy's story, Alvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca's story. So what happens is that he comes with 300 men. He lands somewhere near Tampa Bay, present-day Tampa Bay in Florida. Okay? And Panfilo de Narváez is clearly no Hernan Cortés or Francisco Pizarro. He doesn't seem to be a very bright guy. What he does is that he lands with his main force, okay? And he has 5 ships. He immediately sends his 5 ships away. He says that there is supposed to be a very big harbor nearby, somewhere up north or wherever. So you guys go and find the harbor and you guys drop anchor there. And we will catch up with you eventually. So immediately what he does is that most of his men who are now on land, they are immediately cut off from all resupply, and whatever stock they had, whatever supplies they had, and whatever reinforcements they may have had from the ships. Immediately cut off from that. And then he sends a detachment of men for the north to do some reconnaissance. While he and his men, they essentially try to navigate the territory, and they go westwards from where they have landed. And immediately they encounter natives, Indians, and the Spaniards are pretty hostile people. So the natives also, they treat them with hostility, and there are multiple battles, and Spaniards die. So after a while, after they spend the entire summer going through this territory, they are cut off from their ships because of Panfilo de Narváez's own order. They spend the whole summer slogging through the marshy territory. It's very marshy, the territory of the terrain of Florida. Okay, so it's not easy to navigate. There are lagoons and there are marshes and that sort of thing. The climate is also pretty harsh if you're not used to it. So after the summer, there are 242 survivors.
Oh.
Many of them die. Okay, many of the original 300 die, and there are 242 of them left. And going westwards, they eventually what happens is that they discover that their ships have gone. Their ships must have waited for a long time for them to reach a certain position, but they never came. So the ships have gone. The ships must have decided that these guys must be lost. They must have died, and maybe they sailed back to the Caribbean or something like that happened. So the ships are gone. There is no hope of resupply. There is no hope of any of that. So the question is then, how do we go back to Cuba or to the Caribbean? So what they do is that they have horses. Okay, so they are slaughtering their horses and eating them.
Oh my God.
Okay, and they
By themselves, they got the horses and they're eating the.
Well, desperate times come for desperate measures.
Yeah, I understand.
They are under attack by the natives. The natives
Yes.
don't like them. There are many battles. Okay, they also capture some natives and things like that happen.
Oh.
But so there is this hostile relationship with the Indians. They are under attack all the time. So that's how over time many of them die. 242 are left. Then they don't have any navigator with them. They don't have anybody with shipbuilding experience, and they have to get back to the Caribbean. So they somehow build rafts or barges, small boats or rafts or whatever, and then they go upon these barges into the Gulf of Mexico. And instead of going eastwards to the Caribbean, they're going further westwards for some reason. Now, we don't know why they're doing that, okay? We don't know why they're doing that. So
By mistake, or it was.
I'm not sure why they're doing
okay,
that.
sorry.
We don't know why they're doing it,
All right.
but they're going westwards. So everything was just going wrong. It was all piling up on top of all the mistakes were piling up. So they discover, so they're going westwards, and then they find this gigantic river. Okay, so when they're on the rafts in the Gulf of Mexico, they quickly run out of water and food. And then what some of them do is they start drinking seawater.
Oh.
And some of them die because of that.
Oh my God. Yeah, definitely.
Okay? So it's in an even more disastrous situation. And then they find this gigantic river that's emptying out into the ocean. So yeah, great, there's fresh water there, let's go and drink. But the river's current is so strong that the rafts are all blown apart.
Oh.
Okay, and some rafts go like the rafts are pushed further into the Gulf of Mexico, into the ocean. So they, without realizing it, they discovered the Mississippi, the biggest river in the United States. Okay, so so what happens is that this guy Alvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca, he's on a raft with a whole bunch of guys, and there's another raft on which there is the captain, the commander, Panfilo de Narváez, with the fittest guys of the group. So Cabeza de Vaca shouts to this guy Narváez, throw me a rope. Let us bind the rafts together so that we are not thrown apart. And the Narváez says that this is not the time for one man to rule another anymore. Each man for himself. We have to do what is best for ourselves. We cannot be together. And that's the last they see of Panfilo de Narváez and his guys. Then Cabeza de Vaca is adrift at sea, and then there's a gigantic storm. It is what's called hurricane season on the east coast of the United States. You've heard of the great famous hurricanes, Hurricane Katrina and whatever. It was hurricane season. And apparently Cabeza de Vaca sees a hurricane. So there is this hurricane. All the rafts are blown apart. Cabeza de Vaca is on one raft. And they somehow reach an island. Okay? It's now, he calls it the Island of Doom. It's today identified as Galveston Island in Texas. It's a barrier island. It's that sort of thing. We can show it on the map. Okay? So they reach there with about 80 survivors. Okay? They reach with 80 survivors and they find Indians there. The Indians are waiting for them. So they're scared. They're frightened to death of the Indians. Okay? And they have no weapons or anything. So they try to again launch the raft. I think... and they try to again launch the raft, and they go a little bit further to sea, and then the raft overturns and more people die. And so it's disastrous. And then they try to use their shirts and clothes as sails. Doesn't work. And so they are again pushed back on the island, and this time they've lost even their clothes. They've got nothing left. They are completely naked. 80 naked Spaniards on this island, Galveston Island. They call it the Island of Doom. This storm that they encountered was near present-day New Orleans. And Cabeza de Vaca says that there were two storms at the same time. Once the winds were in one direction, and then the winds suddenly took another direction. You know what that means? The eye of the storm passed over them. The eye of the hurricane. So if you look at the eye of the hurricane, in one part of the eye, there's winds in a certain direction. And on the other side of the eye, the wind is in the opposite direction. So most likely the eye of the hurricane passed over them. That was how violent the storm was. So about 80 survivors are stranded on this island. They have no clothes, nothing. And the natives come to them, and these guys think that they're going to be eaten and all that. But the natives, they look at their situation, their condition. It's so wretched, it is so terrible that the natives sit down and start crying. So apparently these are sympathetic natives. And the natives take them to whatever settlement they have, and they give them some food and shelter and all that. Okay, and somehow these people spend the winter there. Okay, and what happens is that during the winter there is an illness that spread through the encampment. It affects the natives. It also affects the Spaniards. About half of the natives die. And then the natives decide that these Spaniards are responsible for this. And they may well have been somehow. They may have brought some kind of, some kind of bacterium or virus or something which affected these people, some kind of stomach ailment. So the natives decide to kill the Spaniards.
The remaining, those 80 people.
After the winter, after the illness and everything, there's about 15 Spaniards alive.
Oh my God.
Out of 80. And the natives decide we're going to kill them all. Because they must be responsible for this illness. And then somehow somebody convinces the natives that let's give these people, these Spaniards, the chance to heal us. They brought the illness perhaps, but it's also affected them. So it's not like they were trying to kill us. It's also killed them. So give them the chance to heal us. So the natives had this, they apparently had this custom of healing by blowing where it hurts. Okay? So if let's say your wrist hurts, then you're supposed to blow on that, blow air on that, and hopefully that takes away the illness or disease. So the Spaniards knew what the practice was. So what they would do, so when they were given the opportunity to heal the natives, what the Spaniards did is they did the same thing of blowing on the affected parts where it hurts, but they also said some Christian prayers on top of it. And luckily enough, the illness went away. So then these natives, they decided that these Spaniards are great healers. Okay? So 1529, so 1 year or so, Cabeza de Vaca and some people were on this island. Eventually, most of the Spaniards die. In 1529, Cabeza de Vaca flees from this island to the mainland. So from the island to the mainland is about kilometer and a half of sea. It's a lagoon kind of thing. It's not very deep and it's not very treacherous to cross. So Cabeza de Vaca flees to the mainland. There he comes into contact with other Indians, other Indian groups, tribes and all that. And until 1533, for 4 years, he does trading. So he brings goods from one tribe to another, and sometimes he trades between enemy tribes as well. And he learns their customs and languages and all that. So he will trade seashells and various other things that they desire between tribes, and that way he's a completely free man. On the barrier island, Galveston Island, he was being made to do some manual work and all that, which he did not enjoy. And apparently he describes the situation as being enslaved over there. So for 4 years he does this, okay? And every year he goes back to the island because there's a Spanish guy still there. And he wants the Spanish guy to come with him, go to the mainland and try and discover some other place or maybe flee back to the Caribbean. But the Spaniard who's still on the island, he has gone native. He has got a native family and he doesn't want to go anywhere.
Okay.
So 4 years, this guy tries to convince the guy to come with me and we'll go somewhere, but it doesn't work. So eventually, 1533, he goes further inland, Cabeza de Vaca. He finally decides that this guy, my friend who is on the island, is not going to come with me. So he decides to go further inland. So he does that and he finds 2 Spaniards there. Okay, so remember when Narváez first landed in Tampa Bay, he had sent his ships away and he had also sent a small detachment of men further inwards. And then with the main body of men, he spent the whole summer going through the marshes of Florida. So one small group of Spaniards was detached in the very beginning. So 2 survivors exist, okay? And they have apparently been enslaved by another Indian tribe. So in 1533, he meets these 2 Spaniards. One is a Spaniard, one is a Moroccan slave. Okay, he's a slave of the other Spaniard who is also enslaved. But right now, both are slaves, apparently.
Okay.
And the Moroccan guy, his name is Estevanico. Okay, that's his name. So 1533, he meets these 2 guys, and he's also enslaved by this tribe. In 1534, they escape, all 3. Cabeza de Vaca, the Spanish guy, and the Moroccan guy. They escape and they flee westwards. So their story is always going westwards. Okay, the Caribbean is in the east, and they came from the east, but they are going westwards now. So they flee. Maybe they had no option but to flee westwards, whatever. Once you're inland, you can't, some things you can't control. So they flee westwards. And they take this, so it's in 1534 that they start this trek westwards. And they have acquired this reputation of being healers. Okay? So they go to so they're going westwards and they come across villages because the Americas were significantly populated. There's a big population of natives there. So they come upon villages and they act as healers and they do the ritual of the Spanish Christian prayer plus the blowing on the affected body parts and all. And apparently the natives, every time they feel good. So, and they give them all kinds of food and nice things, and they give them gourds. You know what's a gourd? A gourd is a vegetable that belongs to the pumpkin family, like bottle gourd, ridge gourd, all that. And in the Americas, apparently in those days, healers, they carried gourds. So they are given gourds, and they develop this great reputation as healers. They're going through this extremely arid territory. If you watch Breaking Bad, you will see what kind of desert you have there, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So that sort of territory, it's very hot in the summer. And apparently the Cabeza de Vaca, he writes that we Spanish, we were not accustomed to being under such sun. We did not have any clothes. We were all naked. So like snakes, we shed our skins twice a year. That's what he writes. Okay. Maybe it's an exaggeration. Maybe it's not. But they were like burned by the sun. They were not used to it. And their skin was too light to bear the heat, the radiation from the sun. So over time, going westwards, they acquire a big following, a big retinue of people. They're all following these three guys. These three guys are healers. They're going westwards. It's like Forrest Gump running across the Americas, and there's a whole group of people eventually running after him, running with him. That sort of thing. Okay? So you have these three Spaniards. Cabeza de Vaca is the main guy. There is Estevanico, the North African
Moroccan slave.
the Moroccan slave, who is now a great interpreter. He understands the local languages. He learns he picks up local languages very rapidly, and he acts as the interpreter. And the Spaniards, to acquire a higher aura of mysticism, they refuse to communicate with anybody, and they have Estevanico act as the interpreter between them and the locals, and that sort of thing. And they keep going westwards, and eventually they get annoyed with the natives, because then whenever they come across a new village, the natives who are following them, they plunder the village, and they take all the possessions. And then when they go further westwards, the people from that village, they also join the procession, and they plunder the next village.
Okay.
So that sort of thing, the weird situation is going on. These Spanish guys are regarded as great healers, and they have this interpreter with them who's of African origin, Moroccan origin, and that sort of thing. So they start the process in 1534 after fleeing the place where the other two Spaniards were enslaved. And in 1536, they have crossed over into what is now Mexico. They started from the Caribbean, okay? And after, in 1528, in 1536, they have reached what is now Mexico.
So it's 12 years, right? 2836?
It's 8 years.
Sorry, 8 years, yeah.
8 years, okay?
Yeah.
They crossed the entirety of the United States, southern United States, on foot.
Wow.
Okay, on foot. And they meet, and they are absolutely shocked to meet Spanish slave raiders there. I think it was one of I think it was one of Francisco Pizarro's expeditions, slave raiding expeditions. So they were after gold and slaves, right? So there's a slave raiding expedition in present-day Sinaloa in Mexico. Sinaloa. So these Spaniards on horses, they are looking for slaves, and they find this big procession of Indians. They say, great, there are slaves there. They're obviously slaves for them. And then they see these naked white men, then they're too shocked to even speak. they have no idea what to say. They're speechless, the mouth's open. The Spaniards are all naked, the skins are burned, they've got long hairs and beards, and there's a whole hundreds of natives coming with them. It's a very strange situation.
I can imagine.
Right? So they meet these Spanish slave raiders, and eventually they are brought to the capital of New Spain. So Mexico was then called New Spain. So they are brought to the capital of New Spain, which was Tenochtitlan, Mexico City, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. So that's in 1536. And in 1537, Alvar Núñez, Cabeza de Vaca, sails back to Spain. And in Spain, he writes a book, La Relación de Alvar Núñez, Cabeza de Vaca, which means the account of Alvar Núñez, Cabeza de Vaca. It is published in Spain in 1542. And if you read it, you will see that Alvar Núñez, Cabeza de Vaca has developed sympathies for the natives. He's just like Bartolomeo de las Casas, which we discussed in the previous episode. So Bartolomeo de las Casas developed sympathies for the natives. He said that what the hell is Columbus doing? What are his minions doing? They are enslaving and essentially genociding the natives, right? Working them to death. So Cabeza de Vaca lived among the natives for so many years. He saw their customs. He was greatly impressed with the customs of some of these tribal groups and all that. One of the tribal groups, he says that they treat their children with more love than any people anywhere on the world. They will do anything for the children. They treat their women very well. They are very affectionate towards the women. We Christians aren't like that. So he had a great amount of esteem and regard for many of the tribal native tribes and all that. And he obviously was a conquistador, Cabeza de Vaca. He was of the opinion that we need to bring the light of Christianity to these people, but he was of the opinion that we would treat them well. If we mistreat them, if we enslave them, if we genocide them, if we plunder their whatever they have, their wealth and all that, then they will not be that open to becoming Christians. If we want them to become Christians, we have to treat them well. So that's the kind of account, that's the kind of sentiment that you see in his account. La Relación de Alvar Núñez, Cabeza de Vaca. Okay. Now, so that book was published in 1542 in Spain. He sailed back to Spain in 1537. In 1540, he returned to Brazil as he was supposed to be the governor of some territory in Paraguay. Okay, Paraguay was by then under Spanish control. 1540, he lands in Brazil. Then he takes another long land journey, epic land journey once again across the Amazon forest and all that. He reaches Paraguay and he becomes the governor of this territory where the Spaniards already have acquired the land and all that. And he becomes the administrator. And the Spaniards who are already there, they are shocked that he treats the natives as human beings. He doesn't brutalize them, and they are accustomed to treating them like animals. So by 1544, he is arrested for poor administration. And they put all kinds of trumped up charges against Cabeza de Vaca. He is sent back to Spain in chains. And once he returns to Spain, reaches Spain in 1545 in chains. He is chained and he is banished to a penal colony in North Africa for his crimes against the Spanish Empire and all that. Eventually, he was exonerated, but he died in obscurity at a place in a time unknown. Perhaps Valladolid or some place in Spain, but he died in obscurity. So he was another Spaniard who was of the opinion that you have to treat the natives well. And his was an incredible journey. Okay? So it's a journey across much of the present southern United States, starting from Florida all the way to New Mexico and then into Mexico itself. That's the story of Alvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca, one of the first great treks by Europeans across parts of the United States. Now, Cabeza de Vaca, as we saw, he reached Mexico, New Spain, as it was then called, in 1536 when he met those Spanish slave raiders, in present-day Sinaloa in Mexico. And he went to the capital of the region. And what happened there is that the viceroy of New Mexico, the viceroy, he purchased Estebanico, that slave, the Moroccan slave.
The Moroccan slave, the interpreter,
Yeah, he purchased him because he saw that this guy is very resourceful.
Very useful, yes.
Okay, so see, when Cabeza de Vaca and the other two guys, they reached this place, obviously they had to be debriefed. So they had to give a full account of what they had gone through and what the experience and so on and so forth to the Spanish administration and the viceroy and so on. And obviously it is a very interesting and inspiring story, but what they were looking for, what they wanted to hear is the gold, is the treasure. And they mentioned that some of the native tribes gave them gemstones that are bluish in color, turquoise in color. That was most likely turquoise or whatever, but these guys thought there must be emeralds.
Oh.
And there was some hint of gold somewhere, so that's all they needed to hear. Okay? So the viceroy hears the story. He decides that there are enough hints of treasure in this story that Cabeza de Vaca has told me. So he says, okay, Cabeza de Vaca, you go back to Spain, you need to recover, great job, etc. He sends him back, but he purchases Estebanico.
So he had to pay whom?
The guy who was with Estebanico, the two guys who were enslaved when Cabeza de Vaca met them.
Right.
So the guy who was with Estebanico, I forget his name, something. So he was the owner of Estebanico.
Yeah.
So he purchases Estebanico from his owner. Then, so that's 1536. Then the viceroy of New Mexico, he sends a mission to the north. It's called the Tierra Nueva mission. Tierra Nueva means new land. North of New Spain, which is north of present-day Mexico. So Mexico, they understood, they knew the place, but north, they have no idea what existed there. And this guy, Cabeza de Vaca, has come from here, and they heard of things that sound like there could be treasure there. So the viceroy purchases Estebanico. In 1538, he assembles a new mission called the Tierra Nueva mission, and the leader is Fray Marcos de Niza. Fray Marcos de Niza was a veteran of Francisco Pizarro's conquest of the Inca people in Peru. Okay? And Fray Marcos de Niza was a Christian priest. He was a friar. In Robin Hood, there's this character, very famous character called Friar Tuck, who's famous of drinking ale. He's a drunk. So a friar is a monk. He's a Christian priest, but he is not a monk who is closeted off from the world. A friar is a guy who is a priest and a monk, but a worldly monk who lives in regular society and interacts with regular society. So this Bartolomeo de las Casas was a friar, if I'm not mistaken, if I remember correctly, and Fray Marcos de Niza, the leader of this new expedition, the Tierra Nueva mission, was also a friar. Okay, he was a veteran of this conquest of the Incas in Peru, and he was from the French city of Nice.
Okay.
That's why he was called Fray Marcos de Niza.
Nice, yeah.
So Nice is Niza in Spanish. So the leader is this guy, this priest, this Fray Marcos de Niza, and the guide of the mission is Estevanico,
Okay.
the Moroccan.
The Moroccan.
Okay? So 1538, the expedition begins. And the objective is to go northwards of New Mexico, New Spain,
Yeah.
and explore the lands over there and find where the treasures exist. Okay? So Estevanico is a veteran of this. He has spent many years wandering. He understands the native customs. He understands many of the native languages. So what they do is that Fray Marcos de Niza goes northwards at a leisurely rate with his people. But Estevanico races ahead in a separate group. So Estevanico has a number of people with him, and he is sent as let's say an advance guard of the expedition. And Estevanico is instructed that if there is anything that I need to know, that Fray Marcos de Niza needs to know, then you send back a messenger as fast as possible bearing a cross. And the bigger the news, the bigger the cross should be. Okay? So Estevanico races ahead, and Fray Marcos de Niza comes leisurely behind him. So after a while, Estevanico sends a messenger to Fray Marcos de Niza, and the messenger is carrying a cross as big as a man. So clearly, it's a gigantic news.
Yeah.
And Estevanico sends the message. The message that he sends is that I have discovered a place where you have 7 great cities. 7 great cities. And the place is called Cibola. Okay? And the cities are magnificent, full of riches. In the cities, there are people who are well dressed. I mean, the Spaniards, they saw nakedness as something that was barbaric. So if there are natives who are well dressed, it means that they must be like really civilized. And there's a lot of gold, obviously. The moment you hear gold, it's like, let's run. So that's the kind of message he sends to Fray Marcos de Niza, Estevanico. So Fray Marcos de Niza starts following, and now the interest has been heightened. And Estevanico, what happens is that he reaches one of these cities, and he comes in the guise of a healer, of a guy who's very wise and so on, who understands the natives. And the message he gives to the guardians or the rulers of the town or the city is that I have come from the land of the white people, and I'm a healer, and let me in, and that sort of thing. And they say, okay, the rulers say, if you have come from the land of the white people, why aren't you white? Why are you black? That sort of thing.
Wow, good question.
So you are not welcome. Get out. Go back.
Yeah.
That's the message that they send to Estevanico. But Estevanico, for whatever reason, he doesn't heed the message, and he goes ahead and tries to enter the city. There's a battle there, and apparently he's killed. Estevanico, shot with arrows. And whoever survived from that group with Estevanico, they race back to Fray Marcos de Niza. They come all bloody, and they say that this battle happened and Estevanico is dead, as far as we understand, and it's not safe for us to go there. So Estevanico is killed, and Fray Marcos de Niza, excuse me, he decides that I should at least go and see this place, Cibola, before I go back to my master, because I have to give some kind of intelligence, some kind of intel about the place. So apparently he climbs a hill where he sees one of the cities of Cibola. And he is told that this is the least magnificent of the 7 cities. And he sees this place, and then he says, okay, now I have a good understanding of what lies out here. And then he returns to Mexico in 1539, 1540. So he had set out in 1538, and he returns about 1.5 or 2 years later to Mexico.
New Mexico, right?
Yeah, Fray Marcos de Niza, he returns. So, and he then he gives an account of what happened. He said that the Estevanico is dead, and there are 7 great cities there, And the cities, each city is at least as great as Mexico City. That's the story he tells them. And he says that there are great animals there, which he has never seen because he never even went nearby. He said there are what? Camels and I don't know, elephants, some kind of magnificent stories he makes. And he even invents some new kind of animal, okay, with a big horn and all that.
Okay.
That's the kind of story he tells back in
his account, yeah.
Yeah, in Mexico. So that to pause here, this expedition beginning with the Narváez expedition, Cabeza de Vaca and Estebanico, and their entire journey across the southern United States, all the way from Florida to Mexico proper. This journey, and then the subsequent Marcos expedition, and the so-called discovery of Cibola, all of this, it set in motion Spain's conquest of the southwestern United States. We're talking about the 1530s, 1540s, 1520s, 30s, 40s over here, right?
Right, yeah.
In 1848, there was a treaty between the United States and Mexico, which ended the Mexican-American War. There was a war that happened. And a treaty in 1848, much later, that's like 3 centuries later, it ended a war between the United States and Mexico. The Mexican-American War. The United States won the war and they annexed a whole bunch of territory from Mexico. If we go to California, you have cities like San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego, and so on. These are all Spanish names.
Yeah, San Diego. Yeah.
San Diego. If you go to New Mexico, you have Albuquerque and all these Spanish names all over the place. Texas is also Spanish. All across the southern United States, you have Spanish names. It was all Spanish territory. And all of this was conquered as a consequence of these expeditions by Narváez, Cabeza de Vaca, Fray Marcos de Niza, Estebanico. All these guys were the pioneers who first set foot in these territories. And eventually the Spanish were able to conquer these territories. In the 19th century, they lost the war to the United States. And the Americans, they annexed a whole bunch of territory. And the Americans paid $15 million to Mexico for the annexed territory, and later another $10 million for another piece of territory. So the consequence, so the Mexicans gained some money out of all this at the end of the day. But so this territory was originally Spanish territory. It later became American territory. Okay, so what you see is that there are legends. There is the legend of the Fountain of Youth, right? The guy who discovered Florida, what was his name? His name was Juan Ponce de León. This legend of the Fountain of Youth in Florida is connected to Juan Ponce de León. Then there is a legend of El Dorado, which is a great city which is essentially made of gold. Everywhere there's just gold. And apparently the city is still hidden somewhere in the Amazon jungle in South America. Nobody has yet discovered it. Okay? So El Dorado is a great legend. The Fountain of Youth is a great legend. The 7 cities of gold is another great legend that fueled these travelers' journeys. Okay? So what was the origin of this legend of the 7 cities of gold? I spoke about the Spanish Reconquista. They reconquered Spain from the Arabs and the Moors, the North Africans, after like 7 or so centuries of occupation. And the occupation of Spain and this entire region began sometime in the 7th and 8th centuries. Let's say the 8th century. So when the Moors, the North Africans, first started occupying Spanish and Portuguese territory, there was this story that 7 bishops, Christian priests from Portugal, they escaped into the Atlantic Ocean in the 8th century to escape from the North African invaders. And they went by ship, 7 bishops went by 7 ships with all their followers into the Atlantic. And the legend is that they founded an island, or they discovered an island over there in which they founded 7 cities. The island of 7 cities. It's called Antillia. Antillia. The island of 7 cities. That name sounds familiar in India somehow, right? There's this very famous building called Antillia somewhere.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Oh my. Okay.
Okay, so Antillia is this legendary city that apparently floats around in maps, ancient maps, that nobody's ever founded, that nobody has ever discovered thus far. But it's supposedly an island of 7 cities, founded by 7 bishops from Portugal, who escaped from Portugal into the Atlantic Ocean during the Moorish invasion of the Iberian Peninsula. Okay, so 7 cities of gold. And then when Estevanico sends the message to Fray Marcos de Niza that I've discovered 7 cities, immediately that legend comes to his mind. And he's like, oh my God, there must be gold there. So that's why he makes up these fantastical stories. That each city is at least as magnificent as Mexico City and all that. Okay? So Marcos de Niza returns to the Viceroy in New Spain. And the moment the Viceroy hears about these 7 cities and gold and great animals and all that, he, from his own money, finances a gigantic operation, an expedition. Biggest expedition thus far.
Okay.
From his own money. And he even takes some debt from other people.
Okay.
So he has his own money that he puts into this thing, and he has investors who come and put their own money. Because they are like, yes, once the return on investment happens, we're going to be fabulously rich. So we have dealt with the Narváez expedition. We covered the Fray Marcos de Niza expedition with Estevanico. Now this new expedition is being financed by the governor or the viceroy of Mexico. It's called the Coronado expedition. Coronado. Okay. So the viceroy he spends 85,000 silver pesos for this expedition. That's the amount of money that goes into it. I don't know what a silver peso is worth, but it's a piece of silver, essentially. It's a coin made of silver. 85,000 such coins made of silver. I'm sure it's a lot of money.
Yeah,
okay. The leader, the commander of the expedition is a guy whose name is Francisco Vázquez de Coronado. That's why it's called the Coronado expedition.
The names are so long.
I know. That's why I have to write them down because you can't remember all the names.
Because they all look very similar, the names are.
Yeah. So this guy's name is Francisco Vázquez de Coronado. He's 28 years old.
28.
Young guy. Okay. And he ends up being the commander and the head of the only European army to ever invade present-day US territory by land.
Wow.
Okay? And the guide is Fray Marcos de Niza. The guy who came and said, I saw Cibola and all that, made the big stories.
Yeah.
Well, Estevanico is dead now. So
Yeah,
now Marcos de
obviously.
Niza has to be the guide.
Definitely. Yeah.
Okay? So in this expedition, there are 300 Spanish persons, 300 Spaniards. There are 1,300 Indios Amigos. Indios Amigos means Indian friends or friendly Indians. Okay? So they are people of Mexico, the Mexico region, who are under Spanish
Team.
who are part of the Spanish team. They are friendly to the Spanish. There's a whole bunch of civilians. Some of them are slaves. We had slavery. Then some of them are the wives of the Spaniards. There are priests. There are painters and whatnot. So roughly 2,000 people in total, out of which about 300 are Spanish actual
Original.
men and some extra Spaniards. About 2,000 people, about 550 horses, and a very large number of livestock, sheep and goats and maybe, I don't know, other livestock. Okay?
So this 550 horses came from Europe only, right?
Yeah, these are all European horses, but then they would multiply, they would breed these horses in Mexico, and then you have more horses.
This is 15 right now?
So we are talking about 1540.
1540.
The Coronado expedition starts in 1540. Okay?
Okay.
That's the starting point. So July 1540. Okay, so July is, we're talking about February right now.
Okay.
The expedition starts in February 1540. It goes north across the Mexican desert, the Sonoran Desert in Sonora. And the Sonoran Desert has temperatures that go close to 50 degrees Celsius in the summer. Okay, close to 50 degrees Celsius in the summer. It's very dry. And so February onwards, February is still the end of winter, beginning of spring. But by the time you reach May, June, July, it's going to be terrible. So the expedition starts in 1540. And you go northwards, you go across the desert, and the temperatures become bad. The climate is terrible. There's very little water to be found. Thankfully, they have livestock that they can slaughter and eat, that sort of thing. And very few creatures can survive this desert, okay, the Sonoran Desert. You have centipedes, you have scorpions, you have Gila monsters, which are a kind of lizard, that is kind of slightly venomous.
Okay.
It's called the Gila monster. And the kangaroo rat that lives in the desert, it doesn't ever drink water.
Oh.
It just eats vegetation, and whatever moisture is contained in the vegetation, that's enough for this thing to survive. That's the kangaroo rat. And the only vegetation is all this dry scrub and cacti. And one of the only edible things over there is the prickly pear, which is the fruit of a cactus.
Oh, yes.
You
remove the stone.
You got to peel it,
Yes, I know.
and then it apparently tastes somewhat like a pear.
I've tasted it. It's nice. Actually.
Okay, yeah. So that's. But you have to be very careful eating them, otherwise it could mess up your tongue and mouth and all that. Yeah. So the prickly pear. So it's a very, very painful journey once the temperatures start rising. So in 1540, in July, this starving, desperate party, it reaches New Mexico, okay, and they find that that Cibola is not westwards; it's eastwards. So you turn eastwards. See, if you are close to the ocean, then you can have resupplies and all that done. But if you have to go inwards, it's all desert.
Definitely, yeah.
Okay, so they discover that this place Cibola, you have to go eastwards inland. So in July 1540, they reach Cibola. Okay, and it is so over here in this region. Okay, that we're talking about, the New Mexico, Arizona, etc., Colorado, this region, you have the Pueblo people who live there. Pueblo people. Pueblo means town in Spanish. And this particular settlement that is called Cibola, it's actually called Hawiku. And the people who live here are the Zuni Pueblo people, the Zuni people, Zuni. And these people, what they do is that they live in these tightly grouped settlements that are multi-storied in nature.
Wow.
So you have multi-storied buildings all tightly grouped together with some kind of common space and that sort of thing. Okay, and these things are called pueblos. These settlements are called pueblos. So they reach the Zuni Pueblo settlement of Habiku, which they discover is Pueblo. It's in New Mexico. And they discover that it is not some great magnificent city or anything. It's a small group of little buildings on a hill.
So now what happens?
And then the kind of curses that were leveled at Fray Marcos Tinisa,
because he lied.
Yeah, so the account says that we cannot write about the curses that were leveled at him. So everybody cursed him in the worst possible way. They discovered that he had led them astray. There's nothing here. But by the time they reach here, these people are starving. There's no water, there's no food. Some of them are hardly able to stand and walk. So they decide at least there'll be food in this settlement. So we have to take this place.
Oh, God.
We have to take it means we have to conquer it.
Yeah.
And obviously those guys who live there, the people who live there, they've already encountered Europeans and they had a battle with them. They had to kill many Europeans. So they know that these people are not coming as friends. These Europeans are all hostile and they have this army of 1,300 Indios Amigos. So they what the natives do is they send the children and women away somewhere else and they just keep warriors there and they wait for these Spaniards and their other people to come to attack. So now, I spoke about moral justification, right? Even if you are going to do the worst kind of thing, you need some kind of moral justification. And they got the moral justification, the Spaniards, from the church, from the Vatican. So there was this Geneva Convention kind of thing of their day. It was called the requerimiento. It's a summons, okay? So what is the summons like? Let me show you what the summons is like. So it was a document that they had to read out. It's a document that they had to read out, okay? They had to first send, so according to their Spanish custom or law of the conquest of the place, of the Americas, Coronado, what he did, he sent a bunch of soldiers, he sent a priest, a friar, and he sent an Indian interpreter ahead to deliver this edict called the requerimiento or summons. And this was drafted many decades earlier by a Spanish jurist or legal person. It was the part of the Spanish crown's attempt to define what is a just war against the Indians. So conquistadors who went to the Americas, they all carried copies of this document. And they were commanded to read it to the Indians before starting any battle. Okay? So here's what it was like. So this proclamation opened with an abridged story of the history of the world. God's creation of heaven and earth. Adam and Eve. Saint Peter and the papacy, the Pope and his institution. It also explained that the Pope in Rome had authorized Spain's claim to the New World. It was a grant that was recorded in various documents, and these you can view if you wish. That's what it said. Okay? It assured the Indians that you can review these documents if you wish. So it's all legal, it's all proper.
Yes.
And then came the summons. Natives who peacefully accepted the Spanish crown as the king and lord would be welcomed with complete affection and a lot of charity. And they would be extended many privileges. So we will not kill your wives and children. We will treat you reasonably well and so on. And Indians should consider this generous offer, taking as much time as is reasonable. That's what the document said. However, if you delay or if you refuse to submit, then the consequences will be immediate and awful. I assure you that with the help of God, I will attack you mightily. I will make war against you everywhere in every way. I will take your wives and children, and I will make them slaves. I will take your property. I will do you all the harm and damage that I can. I declare that the deaths and injuries that occur as a result of this will be your fault and not His Majesty's fault and not our fault. And then once you deliver this, when you read this out, then a notary or some kind of legal person would be there and he would sign an affidavit that this was delivered and the edict had been pronounced. So it's like when you arrest somebody, you read their rights, right? You have the right to remain silent, blah, 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 that sort of thing. The Miranda rights, that sort of thing. But it was like, not the Miranda rights, it was like the last rights. It was essentially a death sentence. It was delivered in a language that the Indians could not comprehend. Okay?
So was there any kind of interpreter or something?
Sometimes there would be interpreters. But I'll tell you, let's listen.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, it would be delivered in the Spanish language. There would be an interpreter. If there was some Indian listening there, they could interpret. And the Indians did not know who was God, our Lord. They did not know who was the Pope. They did not know what was Rome or the Vatican. They did not know what was Spain.
Yeah.
The kingdom of Castile and León.
Definitely.
And usually it was read without any interpreter present. Usually there would be no interpreter when this was read in Spanish. It was typically delivered from a distance of several miles. It was often delivered in the middle of the night before you attack.
Oh.
Okay? So the Dominican friar Bartolome de las Casas, he said that he did not know whether to laugh or cry at the absurdity of this document. Right. So that's the farce called the requerimiento. Okay, that the Spanish, this technicality was there. As long as we stand a few miles away and we read this out, we have the right to do whatever we want with these natives. So Coronado had this read out, and then he attacks Cibola, which is Hawiku, this Pueblo settlement. And the attackers are desperate because this is the last throw of the dice for them. They are starving, they are half dead. Many of them aren't even able to stand and walk. So those who are still able to do that, they go and attack. And somehow the attack succeeds.
Oh.
And the defenders, they escape. Many of them die, but many of them escape and go away to another settlement. And then the Spaniards and their entire procession, the entire followers, they all,
people,
roughly 2,000 people, they all enter this place. And first thing they do is they break into the stocks of these people, the food stocks that these people have.
Food grains.
And they find lots of grains and everything they need, and the whitest salt they had ever seen, crystal salt and water. And they eat and then they rest, and they're like, my God, thank the Lord that we are saved. Okay? So they take Cibola, they take Hawiku, and then they realize that this guy Fray Marcos the Niza was fooling us all along. So once they take Cibola and they are now once again well fed and settled a little bit, Coronado sends scouting parties to various other parts of the region, okay, in various directions. And one of these parties, it was led by a guy called Garcia Lopez de Cardenas. This party, led by this guy, ended up being the first European group of Europeans to see the Grand Canyon.
Oh.
Okay, and they tried to go all the way down, and after a day, the guys who were climbing down, they could only climb half the way down. So it was like the most incredible thing they had seen. So this is what happens. Now these people whose territory, whose settlement they had taken, Hawiku, these people are called the Zuni people, Zuni Indians. Okay, they live in the southern region, southern part of the United States, New Mexico, Arizona, that sort of place. They still exist, surprisingly.
Really? Okay.
They still exist. The people of Florida, who this guy, what's his name? Cabeza de Vaca. So when Cabeza de Vaca reaches Florida and the people, the natives his people encounter, those people no longer exist. Those tribal groups no longer exist. They have been wiped out of existence. But the Zuni people, whose pueblo was conquered by Coronado, they still exist today. And they have survived despite the odds. So we are talking about the Coronado expedition of 1540. And the conquest of the pueblo happened in 1540. In 1598, there was another conquistador. His name was Juan de Oñate. He came with 400 soldiers to conquer this country, this land, the Zuni, the Pueblo country. 1598 we're talking about.
Okay. So 40 to 98, so the gap.
58, 60 years ago, 60 years later. Okay. So this guy, Juan de Oñate, he comes with 400 soldiers. And his nephew was killed by the defenders of one of these pueblos called the Acoma Pueblo. So this guy is all enraged, and he has 800 Acoma people, Zuni people, killed, and he has 600 people that he captures, and he has them maimed. Some of them have their hands cut off, some of them have their feet cut off. Okay? And the Spanish kept very careful records of all their atrocities. So we know exactly what was done to how many people. Okay? So this guy, this barbarian, Juan de Oñate, this is what he does to the people. And today there's a statue of Juan de Oñate over there. Okay? And what happened, this guy writes, Tony Horwitz, is that if you go and see carefully, you will see that one of the feet of the statue has been welded in place. So somebody had cut off one of the feet of the statue, and then they had to make a new foot and put it in place. So it was,
yeah. And
whoever did that put a message there. This is for the sake of our Zuni brothers and sisters, that sort of thing, and that sort of thing. So, so 1598, there was this conquest of the place by this absolutely cruel person, Juan de Oñate. In 1629, the Spanish built a church over the ceremonial chambers of the Zuni people. So the Zuni people have something called the kivas. Kiva is a ceremonial chamber. So in their pueblos, every pueblo will have a ceremonial chamber. So the Spaniards built a church over one of these Zuni kivas in 1629. In 1680, there was a great Pueblo revolt against the Spaniards. The Zuni people stood up and fought back against the Spaniards in 1680. And they were defeated very badly.
So 1620, then 80, again, after a lot of gap.
Yeah, 1629 was when the church was built.
29, okay.
Yeah, and 1680 is when the great Zuni Pueblo revolt happened, which was crushed very badly, very brutally. After that, the Zuni people decided we will never take up arms against the whites. Okay? And they still exist. Because they decided not to take up arms against the whites. Because they realized if you fight the whites, you will be exterminated. So today the Zuni people, they still live there. They still have these pueblos. The Hawiku Pueblo is a ruin today. The place where Coronado, the place that Coronado conquered after this battle. But the other pueblos exist. And some of them have been used in John Wayne movies and all that. And some of them have casinos and all that. So they're making money off the white people again today. And the Zuni people today are officially Christians, but they also practice their old religion. And they have rebuilt their kivas, the ceremonial chambers. And the church is no longer really used anymore. So they are a people who have decided to somehow save their culture, and they have managed to somehow have the culture survive. It's very tough for them. But the Zuni people still exist, the culture still exists. They nominally practice Christianity, but they actually practice their own culture, even today, as US citizens. And you can visit these pueblos and you can, as tourists, and they have museums and things over there, but they keep to themselves and they keep a distance from the whites. So that's an aside, okay? So that's the Zuni people that Coronado defeated in 1540. So then he sent these scouting expeditions to small groups of people, one of which discovered the Grand Canyon. Then in late 1540, a peace delegation arrived from another pueblo, Siquique. Siquique. These people came wearing cow skins, cow hides. Okay, the Spaniards, right? These people are wearing cow hides. And one of the members, or one of the men who came with this delegation is a guy that the Spaniards called El Turco. Means he looks like a Turk, apparently. And they write that Turkish people have dark skin and they have got pleasant features. So this guy had dark skin and pleasant features, so they called him El Turco. And this guy El Turco he told the Spaniards that there is a great place called Quivira. Quivira, which is a kind of a kingdom, okay, which has large towns. It's very rich, very prosperous, and there is much gold there. The moment you say gold, the Spaniards lose all reason, okay? So, and this guy El Turco said that, I don't have my gold with me because these people, the Siquique people who came in the delegation, they have captured me and they've taken my gold. So go and interrogate them. So what happens is that Coronado, he goes to this delegation, he takes them all prisoner. He chains the leader. He chains up the leader of the delegation, and the rest of and he says, "Where's the gold?" This guy says there's gold, and this guy the delegation says there is no gold. What is he talking about? And the Spaniards don't believe him. So the leader is chained up, and the Spaniards set dogs on the prisoners and maim many of the prisoners, which is a very brutal thing to do and what was kind of pointless. But they were desperate for gold because Coronado's boss has sent him to discover the treasure, the gold, and he's becoming desperate. He found nothing in Zuni. He found nothing in Cibola. And he discovered there's only 6 towns. There's not seven great cities. There are only 6 towns. Okay? And there's no gold here. So he needs to find gold to please his master. His master has put so much money at stake. So that's what happens. So now Coronado establishes a winter headquarters, okay, in the pueblos along this river in the region called the Rio Grande. It's a very famous river. It kind of forms the border between the US and Mexico today at certain parts of its course. So Coronado establishes a winter quarters in this region near present-day Albuquerque. Okay? And the Spaniards, what they do is that they loot the neighboring pueblos. They loot food from them. They loot blankets from them, and then molest the native women. Okay, and then the people obviously fight back. The natives fight back, and to pacify this revolt, Coronado has them brutalized. He has a whole bunch of natives arrested and taken prisoner. And to teach them a lesson and to put down the revolt, he has over 100 natives burned at the stake, burned alive.
Oh,
yeah.
Why? Just to
set an example,
Okay, yeah.
Don't fight us, otherwise we can do this sort of thing. So hundreds of natives are killed. At least 100 of them are burned alive, burned at the stake. More than a dozen of these settlements called pueblos are destroyed. That's what Coronado does. And Coronado's expedition documents in great detail various massacres, various sexual assaults, incidents of torture, mass torture, burning dozens and dozens, hundreds of people at the stake, that sort of thing. Okay? And this was what he called Conquista y Pacificación, conquest and the pacification of the region. You have to conquer the region and then you have to pacify it, means you have to bring peace.
Okay.
So, one of the... during the Roman era, I don't know who it was, who said that the Romans, they create a wasteland and then they call it peace. which
Okay.
means they destroy everything and then they say it is now pacified, it's peaceful. So that's the kind of thing the Spanish did over here. Okay, and his actions were so brutal that some of his men started turning against him. I mean, they could not take it. I mean, these are Spanish conquistadors who are used to brutality, but some of his men started turning against him. Coronado. Okay, that was interesting. That when you had the conquest of Mexico City, Tenochtitlan, by Hernan Cortés, it was accompanied by a brutal epidemic of smallpox, which actually killed more people than the Spaniards. Now, and we find the same thing happening in the Caribbean region. The Spanish bring all these diseases and the natives die, also because of starvation and overwork and all that. But there are epidemics that are recorded. But when you have the Coronado expedition passing through the Pueblo region, which is a significantly populated region, and the Spanish come very much in contact with the natives, there's no epidemic here. Okay? So, and Spanish explorers came back in the region a generation later. I spoke about this guy called Juan de Oñate, who came in 1598.
Yeah.
So Spaniards came later also, and they recorded no population decline. So it's strange
How?
that, that's the question. It's an open question. That maybe modern historians, I mean, we know that in some places epidemics happened. But it looks like modern historians have chosen to focus a lot on disease. And by focusing on disease, many of the scholars, they have sanitized the barbarities of conquest and absolved the invaders of the horrible things they've done. So because there is no record of any epidemic or any disease as a consequence of the Coronado expedition, right? So Europeans, the historians say that the Europeans did awful damage to the natives, but most of it was unintended and inevitable. It was just the diseases that came with the Europeans that did most of the damage. But if you look at the Coronado expedition, there's no epidemic associated with it, which is strange.
Yeah.
Which is strange. Okay, so that is something that happened. Conquista y pacificación. That is in the winter of 1514. Now, so they find this guy called El Turco, the Turk, and he says there is a place called Quivira where there's a lot of gold. So after the winter is over, sometime around April of 1541, Coronado is guided by this guy called El Turco, and he leads his men and the entire force eastwards towards what's called the Great Plains region of the United States. And he's looking for this fabulous city called Quivira. Okay? So the Great Plains region of the United States is a vast grassland that once covered an entire quarter of the continent. And it's extremely flat territory. So you go into the Great Plains region, there's grass everywhere. You sit down, you look around. Every single direction you look in, you'll see the horizon. There's nothing. There's not even a rise of a foot or two in some places. Okay? That's the kind of place it is. Just grasslands, and just flat grasslands. It's crazy. You go for days and days and you see nothing on the horizon, no feature. That's the kind of place it is. Today, if you go by vehicle, you will see features, obviously, because you go so fast. But if you're going on foot or if you have a whole bunch of men on horseback, it takes days before you see something. So that's the Great Plains region of the United States. So after 10 days of travel, they're going through this grassland and they discover cows.
Okay.
Cows. They have no word for this animal, so they call it cows. It is a great brown beast with this great shaggy hair on it.
Is it bison?
It's bison.
Oh,
buffalo.
bison, sorry. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, bisons. And they have this beard and these red eyes and they look very scary and they're very, very, very aggressive, that sort of thing. So they discover the bison. Bison are called buffalo in the United States, in North America. And they discovered that there are millions of cows pounding across the Great Plains. And the herds are so vast, so enormous that to count them is impossible. Okay? Until the early 19th century, about 30 million bison roamed the plains.
Wow.
In the early 19th century.
To 30.
In the early 1800s. 30 million.
30 million, not 3.
No,
Oh my
30
God.
million. That's the early 1800s.
Oh my God.
By 1900, there were less than 1,000.
So what happened?
The Americans killed them all.
American-
Systematically.
Oh.
The US Army, the US Rangers. And
Why?
Because the Great Plains Indians, their entire livelihood depended on the bison.
Okay.
Okay, everything. The food was bison. The clothing was bison. The tents or the dwellings, they have the wigwams, the coverings for bison. For fire, they used bison dung.
Okay.
Everything was based on the bison. Their entire lifestyle, everything was
Yeah,
based
their
on bison.
lives.
So to destroy their lifestyle, and to force them to migrate somewhere else, the Americans killed off the bison. More than 30 million bison were killed. So 1800s, early 1800s, you have 30 million. By 1900, there's 1,000. Today, there are several 100,000. They have been somehow brought back to life, but not even a million today. So these bison were first discovered by Europeans in April 1541 by Coronado and his men, and they called them cows. Okay. Now, several weeks after entering the plains, the Spanish also met Indians. But these Indians were very different from the ones they met before. These Indians were tall, like a foot taller than the Spaniards. And they were very well built, very athletic. They were nomadic people with extremely statuesque features and painted faces.
Okay.
Okay. And they followed the buffalo herds. They were nomadic and they lived entirely off the buffalo. Okay. And these Indians had no horses, but they used dogs as beasts of burdens. They would harness dogs and put various burdens on the dogs, and the dogs would follow them around. And if something fell off, then the dogs would sit down and howl until somebody comes back and puts the burden, ties it again properly on him or her. That sort of thing. So once these Indians acquired horses in the future, they became the most formidable native fighters on the continent.
Wow.
And the Americans spent decades fighting them. But that will come much later, in the Understanding America series. So yeah, they discovered the Plains Indians. And these Plains Indians had not heard of the Spaniards, how horrible they were, barbaric and brutal. So they spoke with the Spaniards, and the Spaniards obviously asked them, where is Quivira, the city of gold? And the nomads, the Plains Indians said that Quivira, yeah, whatever the place you're referring to, it does exist, but it's not a great place. It's not a rich city. It's just some settlement. There's nothing great there. So Coronado is disappointed, but he still wants to pursue Quivira. So he sends back the bulk of his army back to New Mexico. And he continues with a small number of people, about 30 horsemen, towards Quivira. And he has El Turco with him, the native guy. So they enter a place, the southwest part of Kansas, present-day Kansas, which is in the middle of the United States, kind of. And that place in the 1930s was hit by a devastating climate change kind of event, the Dust Bowl, the 1930s Dust Bowl. What happened is that in the late 19th century, people who moved to this region, they found all this grassland, vast flat plains and all that. And they started cutting off the grass and planting crops and all that over there. And when there was a drought eventually, there was nothing to hold the soil together. And there were these big winds that were coming in. There's a drought, so the soil is completely dry. And it all flew up into the atmosphere. And it was called the Kansas Dust Bowl. So Coronado and his guys could have predicted that when they saw this place. But yeah. So they reached this place, southwest Kansas. And eventually, after 77 days of traveling, they reached this place called Quivira. And it's a place of huts.
Again, disappointment.
There is some corn there, but there's no gold. So Coronado realizes that he was duped by Fray Marcos de Niza, and now he has been duped by El Turco. And he has been led astray by his greed for gold. If you watch the movie The Good, the Bad and the Ugly,
Okay.
The Good, the Bad and the Ugly, the climactic scene, the music is called The Ecstasy of Gold, in which one of the protagonists, the good, bad, ugly, the ugly.
The ugly was
Tuco.
roaming around, yeah.
Tuco is running in this graveyard looking for the
round,
particular
round,
grave.
yes, the sound, yes.
Right?
With the dog or something.
The
yes.
ecstasy of gold. There's a dog behind him, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how the Spaniards were. They were after gold. They just wanted gold. Gold drove them crazy.
Yeah.
So they had these stories, the 7 cities of gold, the island of the Amazons, El Dorado, and so on. And for the Spaniards, these were not wild fantasies. These were real things. They just had to go. They were just waiting to be found.
Yeah.
So that's why they were desperately trying to find them. And so Coronado discovers that he has been led astray all the way from from Mexico all the way to Quivira, one wild goose chase after another. So they take El Turco aside. They ask him, what the hell is this? And El Turco, he confesses that this peace delegation with whom I had come, they instructed me
To say
to take the Spaniards as far away as possible, take them into the wilderness where they will starve, and lead them astray.
Okay.
They strangle him.
Oh God. Okay.
What else do you expect? So El Turco is strangled. So eventually, in the autumn of 1541, Coronado starts. He starts moving towards New Spain, which is Mexico, present-day Mexico. This expedition obviously could not discover anything of value from the Spanish perspective. They did not discover gold. They did not discover any territory which they could colonize, and so on. But their findings include detailed maps with the Grand Canyon and knowledge of huge territories where Spanish people had never gone before. Okay, so these Spaniards, they are by now emaciated, not enough food. They are very poorly clothed. They are full of lice and bugs and all that because they don't bathe apparently. And everywhere they go, the Indians look at them with suspicion. And there's no friendship anywhere. The Indians know, because these Spanish, by now their reputation precedes them, that they are brutal people. They will loot you, they will take your food, and they will kill your people, and they will burn people alive, and they will molest women. So none of the Indian groups likes the Spanish. At the best, they will not attack them, or they will attack them. So that's the situation that the Spanish are in, and they are going back towards New Mexico. Many of the Spaniards with Coronado wanted to go back and settle the region where the Quivira town was located, because it was very rich, fertile land. And even today, it's very rich, fertile land. And, it's agricultural land today. But Coronado did not want to settle the place. He was disappointed that he did not find what he really came for, gold. And at some point in time, he fell off his horse, Coronado, and became injured. And they keep going back towards New Mexico. And by the springtime, the first 3-4 months of 1542, the entirely demoralized army straggles back they go back to the Pueblo area once again of the Zuni people. And they enter the Sonora Desert again, the horrible desert of Mexico. And then they reach where they're supposed to reach. Coronado returned empty-handed. He was not received very graciously by the viceroy.
Yeah.
Okay. His reputation was dust. And so this is in the springtime of 1542. 1554, Coronado dies in Mexico City. So, yeah, he died reasonably young, and that's just what happened to him. Now, if you read the account of this expedition, the Coronado expedition, there is a mention of an Indian woman, a tattooed Indian woman who was taken as a hostage, as a slave, by the Coronado expedition. Okay, and as they went eastwards towards Texas, she escaped from them. And what you find then is that she was then very quickly captured by another group of Spaniards who were not the Coronado expedition. Okay, they were the De Soto expedition. There was a different expedition.
Oh my God.
It was led by a guy called Hernando de Soto, who makes Coronado look like a saint.
Okay.
Okay?
Oh my God. Okay.
So this woman, she was captured by the two great expeditions of that time.
Okay.
So Hernando de Soto, he set off from Florida, almost the same time that Coronado left Mexico. And this woman ended up being a captive of both groups, and we don't know what happened to her eventually. So we know that Coronado sets off in which year? 1540 was it?
1540.
1540, yes. That's when he sets off towards
42, right? Something.
Yeah.
Then he died in
February 1540 is when he sets off from Mexico.
Yeah. Yes.
In search of Cibola.
Yeah.
Right? Now, let's talk about the De Soto expedition, Hernando de Soto. So Hernando de Soto, He was part of Francisco Pizarro's expedition that invaded and destroyed the Inca Empire of Peru. So, Hernando de Soto was part of this expedition. And he first reached the Americas when he was a teenager. And he very rapidly developed a reputation for being an absolute brute. Okay? A great hunter of Indians. That sort of reputation he developed. And he made a huge fortune in South America. And then in the 1530s, he returned to Spain with a huge fortune. He was very rich now. So he returns to Spain. He marries the daughter of a very rich guy. He becomes very famous and he buys a huge property and all that. But it's not enough for him. He's like a drug lord. The money isn't enough. He wants the danger, the adventure. He wants an even bigger pot of gold. It's like one of the heads of the cartel, like Pablo Escobar or something.
Okay.
Okay? That is Hernando de Soto. So, 1538, he puts all his money into a new expedition. And he takes debt from other people. He has other people come in and they also put in their money. So he's now in debt. Despite being so rich, his money is all in the expedition and he has taken more investors on board. So he's indebted. April 6, 1538, Hernando de Soto returns to Central America. Okay? And he gathers supplies and recruits a crew in Cuba. So his objective is so Hernando de Soto, he has heard about this guy, Cabeza de Vaca. Cabeza de Vaca spent 8 years wandering around the Americas, right?
Yeah.
And the news reached Spain that this guy was discovered and all that. And Hernando de Soto is fascinated that Cabeza de Vaca discovered such a huge new territory, and there are hints of treasure in that also. And de Soto already had seen the kind of wealth the Inca Empire had. So he thought that if Cabeza de Vaca has discovered such a huge new territory, there could be even more wealth there. So he gambled everything into a new expedition. And his objective was so the expedition's objective is to discover new lands north and west of Florida. Okay? So he gathers supplies and recruits a big crew in Cuba. Cuba is already under Spanish rule. His expedition has 9 ships. It has 600 men, including veterans of Peru, of the Pizarro expedition in Peru, which conquered Peru, the Inca Empire. So he has hardened soldiers, let's say.
Yeah.
Okay? 9 ships, 600 men, 220 horses, more than 200 pigs, because you need meat, right? More than 200 pigs. And he has a bunch of perros bravos, killer dogs.
Oh my God. So what are they going to do for?
Their objective, the killer dogs, they will kill on command.
Okay.
Kill.
They
They're
will
going to go and kill. No questions asked. They're trained to kill humans. So these are killer dogs.
So how many of them?
A whole bunch of them. I don't know how many. We don't know the number. But he had killer dogs. And they came with the chains and collars and all that, iron collars, metal collars too, because they knew that we have these many men, but we will need slaves. So they came well equipped, well prepared for capturing a large number of slaves. Okay? So in 1539, in May, Hernando de Soto and his expedition, they set sail from Havana in Cuba with all of these men and supplies and horses and dogs and pigs. And they land on the coast of Florida, once again near Tampa Bay. Okay? They land in Tampa Bay about 12 days after leaving Havana. And over there, immediately they discover Indians because the place was well populated. And these guys, Hernando de Soto, he's not a diplomat. He's a warrior. He just goes straight for the Indians and captures a bunch of them, kills a bunch of them. He interrogates them. And after interrogating them, he discovers that there is a Spaniard somewhere here in this region. And he's been here for many years. Okay? So he goes forth and he discovers this guy. So one of his soldiers was on horseback. He had a spear with him. He sees a naked guy, he's going to spear him.
Oh God, yeah, that
But
is
this
Spanish.
naked guy, he says Castile, Castile, Castile.
Oh,
Castile is a city in Spain. So at the last moment, this guy doesn't spear him.
okay.
And they discover that it is a guy named Juan Ortiz. He was a member of the Panfilo de Narváez expedition from 1528,
Oh, yeah.
which was the expedition of
Some
Cabeza de
80
Vaca.
people, yeah, a part of that, right?
Cabeza de Vaca,
Uh-huh,
yeah, that expedition, yeah. It had 300 men, and then
Yeah,
the
yeah,
whole
yeah.
set of disasters
Yeah,
happened.
yes,
We
yes.
discussed that. So this
Yeah.
guy's name is Juan Ortiz.
Okay.
And they find him and they take him into their fold. And for 4 days, he's not able to speak Spanish.
Oh, he is forgotten.
He has forgotten Spanish. Okay, Spain was a whole different lifetime away. But over time,
Able to come
the
back then.
language comes back to a certain extent, but he refuses to wear Spanish clothes. He's too native now. but he's great as an interpreter.
Okay.
Of course, he knows the customs, he knows the lifestyle, he knows the languages of various tribes. So Hernando de Soto says, okay, I have no issue if you don't want to wear Spanish clothes. I will give you the permission to wear whatever you want. But you will be in our expedition now because we have rescued you and you will be our interpreter. So that's the arrangement that they have. So he gives special privileges to Juan Ortiz because he has gone through this entire traumatic experience, 12, I don't know how many years, right? 1528 to 39,
39.
11 years. So
39, right?
39, yes.
Oh.
So we are in the summer of 1939. Okay? So the De Soto expedition begins its journey through Florida. As always, as all these expeditions kind of seem
Florida.
to... Yeah. And they encounter various Native American tribes. And De Soto is a brute. So he doesn't go and do diplomacy. He just goes and captures them and kills them. So very soon the word spreads that these Spaniards are even more brutal than the ones we have met in the past. So, see, these tribes, various tribes and various kingdoms and all, they will have their own political differences. Some may be friendly, some may be allies, some may be enemies, but the word spreads. So all the Indians that these people encounter are invariably hostile towards them. And there are many small skirmishes, battles and all that, right? In the summer of 1539, there's a big battle between De Soto and his men and warriors of a tribe called the Timucua tribe. Timucua tribe. And this battle took place at a place called Napi Tuca. And the Timucua were defeated, and about 200 of them were captured, and they were all executed. So this event is called the Napi Tuca massacre, the first ever large-scale massacre of natives, of Indians by Europeans in the United States.
Wow.
Napi Tuca massacre, 1539. Then in the same year, 1539, there is a battle with a chief called Vita Chuco, and thousands of natives are killed. Okay, and eventually this Soto expedition, they establish a winter camp eventually in the year 1539 at Anhaica, which is the capital of the Apalachee people. Okay, it's near present-day Tallahassee.
Okay.
Tallahassee, and of course they faced a lot of resistance from the Indians and all that, but they were able to establish this winter camp over there in Anhaica, the capital of the Apalachee people. So that is the winter of 1539. Now we are moving to March 1540. So in March 1540, De Soto led his expedition north of Florida, out of Florida into present-day Georgia. If you look at the map of the U.S., north of Florida, you have the state of Georgia. So he moves into Georgia and he traverses this region, and he finds all kinds of obstacles and challenges. Flooded rivers are one of the obstacles, and hostile encounters with the natives. Well, if you behave that way, you're going to have that. So you can't blame the natives for that.
Yeah.
So that's March of 1540. In April 1540, the expedition reaches a village of Aimai, on the outskirts of the Coffitachequi Kingdom in South Carolina. Now we are north of Georgia, we are in South Carolina. There is a kingdom or a chiefdom called Coffitachequi, Coffitachequi. And they reach this village called Aimai, and there they meet a lady who is the queen, let's say, of this nation. The queen of the Coffitachequi. The lady of Coffitachequi is what the Spaniards call her. And she greets De Soto, and she says, do you seek enmity or do you seek friendship? And he says, I'll seek friendship. So she gives him a necklace of pearls, apparently. Okay. And this tribe, the Cofita Chiqui tribe, they spoke the Muscogean language. Okay. And for a while they try to behave themselves, but the Spaniards,
Originality.
they go back to the revert to form, and they engage in various violent confrontations with the local tribes, and they're looting villages along the way. And they take this lady hostage because she's the queen of a large territory. So they take her hostage, they take her prisoner, they allow her to have one or two of her attendants with her, and that's it. And wherever they go, they take her with them, because as the queen, whatever she tells the local villages, they have to do. And because they respect her a lot. So if she's prisoner and she says do so and so, then they will do whatever she says. So she's a great prize for the Spaniards. So they take her as a prisoner. Okay. Eventually, after a few months, she escapes. She manages to escape, and she's never found by the Spaniards again. But once again, a lady who was a queen of a tribe, she tried to be friendly with them and see what they did to her.
Yeah.
Right? So we're now talking about the summer of 1940. They go through North Carolina. They enter Tennessee, the state of Tennessee, and they encounter various Native American groups. And of course, they are looking for gold. They want gold, and they find no gold anywhere. They find no gold anywhere. They find no wealth anywhere. They find great fertile land everywhere, but they find no wealth, not what they're looking for, right? Then in the autumn of 1540, September, October, they spend the De Soto and his army. They spend a month in the Coosa Kingdom, which was a vassal to the Tuscaloosa, who was the great king of the Mississippian people, the Mississippian culture. So Tuscaloosa is the great chieftain or great king of the Mississippian people or culture. His vassal is the Coosa Kingdom. And these guys spend a month or so over there. And De Soto communicates with Tuscaloosa, the paramount king. He demands women and servants. Okay? And Tuscaloosa refuses. So De Soto and his guys, they take him hostage. They take him prisoner. So Tuscaloosa then informed De Soto that if he wants the women and children and all these slaves and whatever, they need to go to a town of Mavila. Okay? A town of Mavila, which is a fortified town in present-day southern Alabama. And over there, he will get the slaves and the women and all that. So they go there, and on October 18, 1540, De Soto and his group, they reach this place, Mavila, with the hostage, Tuscaloosa. And there's a battle there. They're ambushed. And eventually they're able to gain the advantage. They burn the city to the ground. They kill more than 3,000 Indians. Okay? And they kill more than 3,000 Indians. They destroy the city. But about 200 Spaniards die. More than 150 of them are very badly wounded. Some of them start dying slowly. They lose most of their possessions, about a fourth of their horses. So this is called an empty victory, a Pyrrhic victory. It's a victory, but it's actually a disaster.
Yeah, they lost a lot of their...
They lost much of what they had. So that's on October 18, 1540, the Mavila massacre. But it was a disaster for De Soto and his army. Okay? Now we go to 1541, May 21, 1541. So they, after this Mavila massacre, they spend the whole winter in this region, and they're still looking for gold, but they find nothing. On May 21, 1541, De Soto and his army become the first Europeans to see the Mississippi River and standing at the banks of the river. The other guy, what's his name? Cabeza de Vaca and Narváez, they had seen the Mississippi River from the Gulf of Mexico. And it had blown the rafts apart, right? But De Soto and his guys, they stand on the banks of the Mississippi on May 21, 1541. And they see the Mississippi near present-day Memphis, Tennessee. Okay? Now, there is this painting in the U.S. Capitol. Okay? It is called Discovery of the Mississippi. The painting is in the U.S. Capitol Rotunda. The artist is William Powell. And it depicts this great Spanish conquistador, Hernando de Soto, with his great Spanish followers, all wearing fine clothes and riding magnificent horses, while the Indians are cowering on the ground, and the Spaniards are holding crosses and Jesus Christ and all that. And they look so royal and majestic and regal, and the Indians look like people who deserve to be conquered, and the great Europeans, whites, Christians have discovered the Mississippi. That's a great painting. The truth is that De Soto and his soldiers were wearing animal skins by this time. Okay? They were wearing animal skins. Many of them
because they lost everything there in the war.
Yeah. So they were wearing animal skins. Many of them were perhaps naked. Many of them were badly injured. Many of them were sick. Many of them were in poor health. They had lice and they have all kinds of problems. The natives looked much better than them by this point. But yeah, that's the painting. That's the myth the myth building that goes into creating an empire. So yeah, that's 1541. And then the De Soto and his guys, they cross the river, the Mississippi River. They continuing exploring through the state of Arkansas. Everybody in the region is hostile towards them. Nobody likes them, naturally. By this time, that their interpreter Juan Ortiz had died. So they had no means of communicating with the natives. Okay, so it was very hard for them now by this time to get directions and food sources and which direction to go and things like that. And generally, it was difficult now to communicate with the natives. That's 1541. Now, by early 1542, De Soto and his army are exploring Louisiana, which is once again all the way down south. Okay, New Orleans is in Louisiana, the Mississippi River and so on. So they are exploring parts of Louisiana, and they are facing more and more hardships. There's illness everywhere. Everyone's ill. There are dwindling supplies. So now De Soto decides to return to the Mississippi River in early 1542. By May 1542, they have reached near the Mississippi River. And on the 21st of May, after a long period of illness and fever, De Soto dies. Hernando de Soto died on the 21st of May. And his followers had to bury his body in the river. Okay? Because nobody liked him, none of the natives liked him, and they would have desecrated his body or whatever. So he was buried in the river, which means he was tied to heavy stones and dropped into the river. De Soto.
So his mission was not successful for
it was a death march.
Yeah.
It was a disaster. Okay? So that's what happens. And then his second in command, Luis de Moscoso, he leads the remaining members of this expedition. He leads them down the Mississippi River, and the objective is to reach Mexico. And they spend several days on the Mississippi River in these rafts, and every single day they are being shot at by the Indians with arrows, and they have nothing to retaliate with. So they're just trying to somehow find a way to stay alive. So it's a harrowing sail down the Mississippi, and they eventually reached Mexico. Eventually. So this was a death march. It was a disaster. The Spaniards acquired neither gold nor prosperity. They did not found any colonies. Okay, they did not find any of the expected treasures, and they did not find any hospitable site for colonization. Absolute disaster. Now, so these are the three expeditions. The Panfilo de Narváez expedition, in which we had the great hero Alvar, Núñez, Cabeza de Vaca, and Estebanico, the Moroccan guy. That's the first expedition we discussed today. The second was a mini expedition by Fray Marcos de Niza, in which he apparently discovered Cibola, which led to the Coronado expedition, which was again unsuccessful. And the Coronado expedition kind of coincided with the De Soto expedition. So what is the consequence of all these expeditions by the Spaniards in the southern United States and other parts of the United States? So if you look at the De Soto expedition by Hernando de Soto, the last one we discussed, this guy was instrumental in contributing to the development of a very hostile relationship between the various Native American tribes and the Europeans. Through his conduct, through the way he dealt with all the natives. Absolutely brutal behavior. And whenever his expedition encountered natives for the first time in his lands, it was invariably his men who instigated the battles, the clashes. So the Spaniards developed a very bad reputation as a consequence of De Soto.
Yeah, their action always will have a reaction. Yeah.
That's right. Okay. And similarly, even this guy, Coronado, he was quite brutal, but not as brutal as De Soto. He also had people maimed, their hands and feet cut off. He had more than 100 natives burned alive in one instance, and so on. So all of that, right? So overall, the Spaniards developed a very, very bad reputation among the natives. But they did a lot of damage to the natives. A lot of this was done by De Soto, Hernando de Soto, also by Coronado. So what you had in this region was you had city-states and kingdoms, small kingdoms and all. The cities would be typically a few thousand in population. The population of each city big cities of that time in this region would be maybe 5,000 or something. But typically the settlements would be a few hundred people here and there. But overall, it was a big population. And these were settled societies. These were agricultural societies. And because of all the devastation that was brought upon them by De Soto and the massacre at various places and the killings and also what
the
Coronado,
epidemic, the
Coronado came with epidemics. Hernando Coronado did not bring any epidemics, but De Soto brought some disease with him. So all of this, what it did was that it destroyed these city-states. These city-states disintegrated. And historians call this post-De Soto American South as a shatter zone. A shatter zone, it's like the societies no longer exist the way they have evolved to exist. They have been destroyed. Their normal way of life is destroyed. Their subsistence, their means of subsistence are gone. The numbers have fallen below the optimum numbers. So now they are subsisting as hunter-gatherers. And they are competing for hunter-gatherer resources, which are scarce.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay? And eventually, over time, what happened was that many of these tribal groups coalesced into new tribes, such as the Creek tribe, the Choctaw tribe, and so on. Okay? But the population of many of these regions dropped drastically. Okay? And it was... And once the English and French traders ventured into this region in the late 1600s, early 1700s, see, Coronado and De Soto, that's 1540, around 1540.
Yeah.
The French and the English arrive in this region first in the late 1600s and early 1700s. That's about a century and a half later. So by the time the English and the French reach this place, the traders, they reach this place, they find pristine wilderness. They find very few people. And they think that that North America has always been this wild, untouched country with very few natives. And the natives who live here are barbarians. They're half-naked, ragtag people who have no means of survival and no culture and no civilization and no society. That's the impression they gain. But this was not the case. You had highly settled, organized agricultural societies that were destroyed by people like De Soto and Coronado. Okay? So that's the land, the country that the French and the English discovered. And that's the country that eventually became the United States of America. So one could say that Alvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca was the first American because he was the first European to properly explore the United States with a couple of others. And he left the land a changed person. See, the United States has always been about living in the wilderness, subsisting on your wits and your bravery, and making the best out of nothing, and discovering new lands and new frontiers, and being a pioneer, and settling savage land and all that. So the first person to actually do something like this was Alvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca. So maybe he was the first American, right? But anyway, so the Coronado expedition, the De Soto expedition, they had this effect on the land and the people and the societies that inhabited the land. Today, if you go to the lands that we discussed, the southern United States, Florida, all that, only the Zuni people live there. Zuni people exist.
So he was the first European, I think, not American, right?
The first European.
Okay,
Who?
yeah. The guy landed over there in...
Cabeza de Vaca.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he became the first American.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. All right. That is
It turned him into an American.
okay. Yeah, because he
What
becomes
is the
like
US,
one of
what is the American ethos? The American
yes,
ethos, the American way
assimilated
of
with the local
life.
culture. Yeah, that way. Correct.
The American ethos, the American way of life is about being an explorer, being a pioneer, being free. The US is the land of freedom, the home of the free and the land of the brave, or whichever way. So it's all about living, surviving through your wits and turning wilderness into civilized land and all
Right.
that. So that's kind of what Cabeza de Vaca did. The first person we kind of discussed, and maybe he's the first American. Okay, but the Soto expedition, the Coronado expedition, they had this devastating effect on the people, the societies of this region. They turned it all into wilderness. Eventually, that was the long-term effect of that. The only people that kind of still survive are the Zuni people, the natives of Florida, and all the various natives that Narváez encountered, that the Vaca encountered, that Coronado encountered. Not Coronado, but the Soto. The Soto. All the native tribal groups these people encountered, they no longer exist. If you go to Galveston Island, the island of doom, where Cabeza de Vaca was first stranded, there's no natives there today.
Okay.
No natives at all. So all the natives, many of them, most of them have been exterminated out of existence. The Zuni people still survive. And when it comes to the peoples that the Soto encountered, they eventually coalesced into newer tribal groups like the Creek Indians and the Choctaw Indians. And this eventually was the land that the French and the English discovered, and which would eventually become the United States. So that's where we end today's episode. After all these discussions, each of these expeditions could be a book in its own, actually. It could be long, but we have kind of covered them quickly. So we end today's episode over here, and in the next episode we will discuss the settlement, the third part of this book, which is settlement. We have covered discovery, we have covered conquest today, and we will next cover settlement.
Yeah.
So that's where we end today.